Welcome then back, everybody, to part 11 of this discussion on Operation Tonga. And in this part, we're going to discuss what happened around the Pegasus and Horsa bridges from around about 5 o'clock in the morning on the 6th of June 1944. Now at 5 o'clock, it's just before dawn, and this is when people around the bridge can hear Allied bombers arriving and bombing the beach landing defences at Sword. And so we're talking towards Sword here, and Richard Todd, Lieutenant Richard Todd, the adjutant of the 7th Battalion Parachute Regiment, says he gets a grandstand view from here towards that bombing. At this point, a company has been pushed back on the south side here. This is Gondry Cafe. This is Bénouville. A company was depleted in the first place because of dispersion on the drop zone. But according to some record, David Saul's book. Sorry, Saul David's book. They're down to fewer than 20 men, with all officers either wounded or killed. It's at this point that Private Michael McGee, he perceives a Panther is going to overrun his position. And presumably when we talk about Panther, we're talking about he's coming down this road here. He perceives it, that something needs to be done, and he uses his Bren gun to fire at the what he says is a Panther tank. But this gives the opportunity for his friends to attach a gammon bomb to the armored vehicle, which is I think it's kind of like a gammon bomb, is a bit like a sticky bomb. Let me just check. It was yeah, it's a sticky bomb. It's got an elasticized sort of bag of material, a metal cap. And it uses sort of plastic explosives, but you can change the sort of charge inside it. So you'd fill this sort of bag with explosives, and then you could take off the cap, which would give a linen tape. It's kind of a fuse thing. Anyway, yes, Private McGee fires his Bren at the armored vehicle. He, in the process of doing this, gets wounded, and he would die later that day and receive a Distinguished Conduct Medal posthumously. His citation was that McGee had complete disregard for his personal safety, was largely responsible for the successful and gallant action fought by his company. This brought Bratz's advance to a standstill, and there the company, the 8th Company, then moves back, and he moves into what is described as parkland to the south of the village. And when we talk about parkland south of the village, then I think we must be talking this area here, around this tower and the chateau. And so he has pulled back. He's going to wait for reinforcements, and in the meantime, he's going to use his mortars and self-propelled gun to fire from this position towards Pegasus Bridge, which is the bridge over the canal, which is here. And he's going to do this whilst he waits for the reinforcements from Panzer Regiment 72. Sorry, 22. Those they were actually stationed to the south at Falaise, near Falaise, to the north of Falaise, and they actually didn't get orders to move until 8 o'clock in the morning. So this guy, he's going to have a bit of a wait here. And remember, now it's getting light, so any tank movements the Germans make at this point is going to be during daylight, and it's going to be susceptible to what's known as Yabo attack. They call it Yabo. It's German term, just basically for the Air Force attack on the ground. So more and more paratroopers are arriving from the drop zone as they come in. Pinecoffing is building up his defenses in this area here. He moves. He's expecting a counterattack from the west and the southwest. He moves Major Roger Neal's B Company, occupying the south half of Le Port and the woods to the north of the road junction. And this is, he wants to maintain this strip of land here on the west side of the canal. He needs to maintain a passage along here, basically towards Sword Beach. This is where Lord Lovat's commandos are expected to arrive. They actually come from this direction, this village here. So he's trying to make sure that there's a pathway through. At the moment, he hasn't got control of this village, and there are snipers. So he's got B Company up here in Le Port. He's got A Company down to the south, and C Company is in reserve still. He also has, so he can send his reserve in to support A company or B company whenever he likes. And he's also got Howard's men who are basically in this area in the middle here, acting as reserve. And we get at this point there's reports of French refugees trying to cross the bridges. Doesn't mention from which direction. Estimates. So yeah, it doesn't mention which direction, but we assume probably crossing west to east, away from the firing. Just in terms of actual numbers, just to keep everyone just up to speed, it's estimated at this moment that Lieutenant Colonel Pinecoffin has around 200 men at this point, and we're talking from a battalion strength, which is probably more like 800. And he could also call upon the 70 men of Major John Howard's D Company, so he's got about 270 men at this point. At this point as well, which we're talking about 5 o'clock in the morning, he believes that they've experienced 8 separate attacks from the German troops from the south. This is the first mention as well at this time of snipers. The light is dawn is coming up, and there is reports of sniper fire coming from this chateau here to the south. So they're they talk about sniper fire from the upper floors of the chateau, so probably a windows in this sort of area here. This will be the view that a sniper has towards the bridge. So this is the sort of range. So anyone now crossing the bridge are likely to be targeted. This is from the south. On the north side, there's reports of sniper fire coming from the church tower at Le Port. So again, looking this way and receiving sniper fire towards the bridge in that direction. So at this time as well, we've got so we have reports. I think what time are we talking now? We're talking maybe so we're pushing on in time. We're getting to about midday. And we start hearing the first reports that bagpipes can be heard. So Lord Lovat's first special brigade landed at Sword Beach on the eastern side of it. So this is Sword Beach. I'm not sure the far end here is used so much because it's very close to the port and the defence is there. But in this sort of area here, the Commandos come in. They push inland, and they come in via this village here. So the bagpipes are playing, and what's happened now is that Pinecoffin realizes that he can hear the bagpipes occurring, but he doesn't signal back to them, because between where he is here and where the Commandos are, the village of Le Port is still occupied by Germans. So he doesn't want to signal that everything's okay, come in. He wants them to make sure that they're still very aware that there's still danger ahead of them. The First Special Service Commando Brigade, they're the vanguard, I suppose. The Lord Lovat's commandos. He was the 25th chief of the clan Fraser. He's a veteran of 2 commander raids. One was Norway in March 1941, and the other was Dieppe in August 1942. And so his task on D-Day was to reach the bridge. They landed, I believe, around about 8:30 in the morning, and they're tasked with reaching here in about 3.5 hours. It's about 6.5 mile distance. So the vanguard is led by number 6 commando and Lieutenant Colonel Derek Mills Roberts. And because of they land, as I say, at about 8:40 a.m., but they've experienced German opposition. But their commanders, they meet resistance on the way, but they push on. They leave a lot of German resistance behind them. They just keep pushing inland, especially the vanguard. And they approach from the village, which I was just mentioned, is Saint-Aubin d'Arquenay, which is this village up here. So they've approached from the beach, probably along one of these roads here, and then they're now coming down into Le Port. They number 6 commander eventually make their way through Le Port, and they get to the bridge at 2 o'clock. So you may be a few hours late. Lovett shakes hands with Howard. Howard is believed to have said about bloody time, and then he apologizes for the mortaring that's coming from the Chateau de Benouville, and he says the bastards have got the range, but it happens to be a maternity hospital, so he's got strict orders not to disturb the inmates. Wally Parr had actually tried to return fire to the to the chateau to suppress the snipers, but he's ordered to cease fire. Okay, so Lovat, he's going to push onto the river bridge with number 6, 3, and 45 Royal Marine Commandos, and he meets up with Brigadier Poett. This is in between the bridges. This is where the commander of 45 Commando is. He's picked off by a sniper. Poett reports to Lovat, telling Lovat that they're being attacked from the south, and that most of the 3rd Parachute Brigade have been blown miles off course, and they're still forming up. Okay, so this is 2 o'clock. Now this is when another incident occurs, and this is when I'm not quite sure what time it is that this happens, but the gunboat, or a gunboat, comes down the canal. So this is the port of Ouistraham, and the Commandos and the 3 French Commandos have attacked the port. They've come off the beach and attacking the port from this side, back towards it here. And these two gunboats basically tried to escape back down the canal. So they come down this all the way down to here. You get to here, and the trenches on the left here, they fire a Poett. They hit the wheelhouse of the first gunboat, which then crashes into the bank here, and the Germans on board surrender, and the second one turns around and skedaddles back up the canal. Later in the day, another canal, a gunboat, approaches from the south. And this is where Wally Parr uses the German 50mm anti-tank gun, which is located here, to fire at the approaching gunboat. And I believe this is the same gun that Wally Parr was trying to fire at the chateau. He fires at the approaching gunboat, and that isn't destroyed, but it turns around and goes back. And it's just at this point that John Howard says that the enemy attacks start to wane. There is believed to be a German artillery observer on this water tower here, and I think Wally Parr decided to take a few pot shots at that, because he was observing the mortar fire and self-propelled guns in the parkland towards the bridge. We get so in the afternoon it quietens down. early evening, when we get to about 9 o'clock, we get reports of gliders beginning to arrive around Ranville. And this is the 6th Air Landing Brigade bringing in elements of the 2nd Ox and Bucks as well. They're bringing in heavy equipment, jeeps, lorries, anti-tank guns, and stores. At 9:15, Pine Coffin meets up with the 2nd Warwickshires, and the 7th Parachute Battalion is then officially relieved. And it's at this point that the 7th Parachute Battalion begin to withdraw and march across the bridge, heading towards Ranville. And this is when a crudely painted sign is fastened to the bridge that reads Pegasus Bridge. And of course, the Pegasus comes from their logo, the 6th Airborne Division's logo, which was designed by Daphne du Maurier, who was the wife of Boy Browning, the commander. So they're basically saying to the 2nd Warwickshires, this is our bridge, we captured it, and so we'll name it. And eventually, at 1 o'clock in the morning, on the 7th of June, Lieutenant Colonel Pine Coffin crosses over the bridge. So Howard's men have, in the course of the day, he's lost 5 officers, 1 killed, 2 wounded, and 2 missing, and 15 men, 1 killed. He's missing Lieutenant Hooper's platoon and his second-in-command, Brian Prede, which we talked about in previous parts. So of his 4 platoon leaders, he only has Lieutenant Sweeney left. 2 of the platoon's sergeants are injured, and 2 of his platoons are now commanded by corporals. So Howard's men move back across, and they over the course of the early hours of the 7th, he reports to Major Mark Darrell Brown in Ranville Battalion headquarters. And so he actually almost bumps into a German armour in the village of Huru. Here we go. Huru-Villet. When he gets to his, when he reports to the major at the battalion headquarters, this is when Captain Prede and Lieutenant Hooper join up with him. So they've managed to spend D-Day basically tabbing it back from over here on this sort of flooded area. They've taken out a bridge and they move back. What happens later? Well, Daryl Brown, as we just heard, Major. He's ordered to occupy and hold the village of Esquiville. Difficult to... I believe it's this village here. Which is 2 miles to the southeast of Ranville. But he discovers, this is on the 7th of June, he discovers that there's German 21st Panzer elements in this area. Howard in this area is shot through the helmet. The bullet grazes his head, but he gets blood loss and concussion, and so he has to pass command of D Company to Pre-Day, and the company then retires back to Herouvillette, which is the next village up, which is this one here. So Howard and Pinecoffin receive DSOs for this action, and Lieutenant Smith and Sweeney receive military crosses. Lieutenant Poole receives a military cross for his defence of the western bridgehead of the canal, and Sergeant Thornton, for his Piat shot, receives the military medal. 8 of the glider pilots, including Warwick and Ainsworth, received the Distinguished Flying Cross. So this concludes the story of Operation Tonga on D-Day. The significance of it is well, this concludes this part of the Operation Tonga. I've got one more part to talk about, which is the Merville Battery, as I said. But whilst we're here, just to fill in what happens, this ridge here, which is the Bravery Ridge, becomes exceedingly important. The bridges on the River Dives are knocked out probably for a few days, but it means that the Germans know and the British know that this ridge is exceedingly important, because from this ridge you get artillery control of the battlefield below. You get to spot everything that's going on in this area, and so it becomes hugely significant. And even though and this is what Montgomery, this area here, would deem his hinge to his door. If you ever see his plans right back at St. Paul's School in London, when he first gave up, he did predict that he wanted Caen part of that, but that wasn't very possible on D-Day. But this area here would be the hinge of the door which the Americans, the Bradleys and the Pattons, would knock down further to the west and then pivot round. It had to be defended. This area had to be secure, because the German major panzer divisions are up at the Pas de Calais, coming this way. If the Germans had got across the bridges on D-Day, then the panzers could have been on Sword Beach. And holding back the Germans from being able to disrupt the landings, provides a safe, a good buffer zone. The Allies would eventually bring up some Bailey bridges and create London Bridge 1 and 2. And this area, which was the landing zone here to the south, would eventually become the springboard for Operation Goodwood. In fact, I think I would hazard a guess that these marks here are bomb marks, where the Air Force had dropped to create a path for the tanks. But this is the basically the push later month, July, for Operation Goodwood, as the Allies continued to build up their forces on the beaches here. So let's leave this here. We'll say thanks to Major John Howard for his heroics, and the 7th Parachute Battalion and 6th Airborne. We're going to, in the next stream, we're going to be looking at this area here, Melville Battery, what its significance was, and its dangers to the fleet, and the absolute heroics of 9th Parachute Battalion on D-Day, which in some respects is an even more remarkable story. But we shall leave it there then for today. And I'd like to thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next stream whenever. See you later.